What's going on, my good people? Mike Hidalgo here. Thank you for joining us on another FCP Euro DIY. Today we're going to be working on a 2008 R56 Mini Cooper S. Today on the Mini Cooper behind me, we're going to be covering how to replace your oxygen sensors. We're going to be replacing both the Upstream and Downstream unit, both of which are available on fcpo.com and linked in the description below. Typically, these are going to last you anywhere from 60 to 100,000 miles, but that's not to say that they can't fail earlier and or that they can last longer than that. We've seen units last up to 200,000 miles. It really just depends on the vehicle. Some things to notice when you're doing oxygen sensors is you may get a check engine light for a oxygen sensor failure. Depending on the vehicle, you may see poor fuel consumption, and sometimes it may even trigger a multiple misfire code. So just keep that in mind if you're trying to narrow down some check engine light codes on your vehicle. Start with the basics. Depending on the mileage, you may just need O2 sensors. In front of us, we have a Bosch and a NTK unit. We're going to go ahead and cover how to install both of them, but before we get started, let's take a look at some of the tools we're going to need for this DIY. For this job, I highly recommend an oxygen sensor socket set. Today we're using Gear Wrench 41720. It comes with a couple different sizes for different vehicles. The one that we're using specifically is going to be the 22 millimeter socket head. This is Gear Wrench 3925D, 7/8 22 millimeter head. Some snips, depending on your vehicle, you may have some zip ties in the way, I'm sure we do. A flathead screwdriver, a 3/8 drive ratchet, and then it never hurts to have a 22 millimeter wrench as backup. Don't mind the other missing half of ours. And now with that, let's go ahead and get started on this DIY. We're going to start with the Upstream sensor. It's a little bit easier to get to. That's the one with the black electrical connector. Both of the sensors are a little bit different. They have different length cables. The Upstream has a black electrical connector, nice and square. The Downstream has a thin blue one, so pretty hard to mix up. Cable lengths are drastically different. The new one comes with some grommets, which help keep the cable in place. You'll see our old one has a couple zip ties on it, just from previous repairs that this car may have had. Typically, there's one of those two plastic grommets that sit here. Ours is zip tied in, so we'll cut the zip tie. But you can see we have the next grommet on the next spot below. Here's the remains of our original grommet. For that, we can just use a flathead screwdriver, pop it out. We have a metal tab down below that just holds our cable in place. Just slide it out of there. The bottom of this cable loops back up to this electrical connector. We're going to use a small flathead screwdriver to pry it out of the metal housing. And then we have one more metal clip down below, similar to this one right here, that holds our line in place. I'm just going to pop it out with the flathead screwdriver. And now the whole harness is free. And we can just swing it up so we can work on it a little bit easier. Press the tab in, release the electrical connector. And now just comes the fun part of actually removing the oxygen sensor. They have a 22 millimeter head, but we do recommend using an oxygen sensor removal tool. It will make your life a whole lot easier. If you wanted to, you could also cut a cable here and put a 22 millimeter socket on it. That's not going to help you with the install, but it would help you with the removal at least. We have that in place. Just using an extension. Not needed, but it'll just give us a little bit more room to work with. Break it free. Good note, spray some penetrating fluid on the heads of these sensors before you start the job. I sprayed these down last night before we left the shop, just to make life a little bit easier for us. Here's our old sensor. Taking a look at the head on that one versus the head on our new one, you can see it's super fouled. It's definitely old. It's definitely seen better days, but it did well. We're going to set this to the side and we'll get our new one started by threading in our new sensor. Usually these come pre-coated the threads with some sort of anti-seize. Highly recommend you put some on if it doesn't have it already, but the manufacturers are pretty good about that. Once you have this finger tight, you only want to turn it about another half turn to maybe 3/4 of a turn, something that equates about 25 to 30 foot-pounds. So really not a whole lot. We're just going to snug it up using the wrench that we used to remove it. Get that in place. Get our tool in there. That's about a 1/4 turn. We'll give it one more 1/4 turn and we'll call it good. There we go. The goal here is just to crush the crush washer so we don't have an exhaust leak. And while we're here, we'll go ahead and plug in our new sensor. Make sure the locking tab faces the release tab. Also only goes in one way. That's what we want to hear. Now we'll feed the cable back down. It's gonna be a little bit tricky with the new harness. It's not used to being in a certain spot, so you might have to play with it a little bit, get it situated properly. Right now we're just gonna key our connector back into the metal tab that holds it in place. Just using the flathead to get it started. Just gonna reach in there, sorry for the view, and push it in the rest of the way. You want to get it in as best as you can. It's not really going to go anywhere, so if that's as far as you can get it, no problem. I always got to make sure our cables are routed so they're not going to hit on the exhaust shield or anything like that. I'm going to reach in for a hot moment and just get this cable back on the metal clip down below underneath the connector. This is all by feel. You're not really going to be able to see anything until you have it on, and then you can see that the harness is going through that metal clip once more. We're going to reattach our metal clip that sat up here so we can feed our harness through that as well. And pop our rivet over here. This will just keep this cable in place from moving around too much. And I'll throw a zip tie on these just to keep these two together here. And not perfect, but as long as we keep the cables from dancing around and landing on the exhaust manifold or the shield or the turbo, we'll be good to go. All right, my good people, now we are under the Mini. Before we go ahead and undo the sensor, the reason I hold off is just because we're going to do it. We're going to be fighting the harness. We're going to start by disconnecting the harness first. We're going to try to get it from underneath the car. If you just follow the cable up, we'll see the blue connector. It has one of those locking connectors, so we can use a flathead screwdriver to pry it open, and then we can separate the two. There's no tabs in this one, just a lock. So flathead screwdriver or something similar, let's hop in there and pry it open. So flathead screwdriver, we're going to pry this lock open. What I did now is I just pulled the whole connector down. Pulling the tab out some more with my fingers while I work on disconnecting the actual sensor. You can see it just popped right out. It's exactly what we want. We have one metal clip here, similar like the one we did up top, that holds our line in place, and it comes right down. I'm going to take a hot second to wipe our connector down on the harness end, get some of this grime off without introducing any into the actual pins or anything like that. All right, and now with that, we can actually work on removing the oxygen sensor. Again, a 22mm wrench would work on this one, or a socket if you cut the harness off. We're going to use our removal tool. Make sure we have that in the off setting. Same thing, we hit this with penetrating fluid last night. A little bit of effort. And we can get it going. These tend to be a little bit more difficult. They see a lot more road debris, salt, especially here in New England, so they can be a little bit more rusty than the top side Upstream sensor. I'm actually going to switch to a wrench for a hot second. I can't get my tool in a good spot with the heat shield in the way. So if I can just get a few turns on it. It's still very tight. Maybe I can get the tool back on. Yeah, I would rather use a tool. That way I don't risk stripping the head of the sensor. There we go. That's solid. Now we have the threads opened up a little bit. I'm gonna hit it with a little bit more penetrating fluid. I don't wanna risk stripping out the bung on the downpipe here. So we're gonna go ahead and give that another spritz and then continue with the removal. There we go. A ton of corrosion made this one to come out a lot harder. We're gonna clean those threads up a little bit, and now we can go ahead and reinstall our new downstream sensor. And same thing, this new unit comes with a bit of anti-seize on the threads already from the manufacturer. If you don't have any on your brand, make sure you apply a little bit, just a small dab, so that next time you do this DIY, it comes out a lot easier. I'm gonna stick to the 22mm wrench just to get this one on. Makes it a lot quicker and easier to get to than having to install our other tool. That's nice and snug. Our crush washer is crushed. Now we can go ahead and reconnect our sensor. So let's do that now. Now we'll go ahead and connect our new sensor. There's a couple tabs that help line it up. As I push in with one hand, I'm gonna lock in the orange tab with the other. And there we go. Nice and plugged in. Now we're just gonna work on routing the harness back up into those metal clips, especially so it doesn't hit the fan or the motor or anything. Now, typically there's a little black tab up there that the actual connector clips onto. That's gonna be this guy right here. You can see ours is a little bit worse for wear. It probably snapped the second we touched it. So not a bad idea to go back up there, maybe from the top, throw a little zip tie on it, something that'll keep your harness out of the way of everything and keep it in place. Aside from that, my good people, that is going to conclude this DIY for today. If you have a check engine light, be sure to hop in with your favorite scanner. We recommend the Autel units. Go ahead and clear that code before you go for a test drive. That way you know it's good. Putting in the new sensors isn't just going to clear it on its own. Otherwise, be sure to give this video a thumbs up if you liked it. If you have any questions or comments on what we did today, leave those in the comment section below. And if you like this DIY and you want to see more like them, please consider subscribing. We make new ones all the time. As always, thank you so much for watching. We'll catch you in the next one.